Welcome to the American Society of Quality Lean Enterprise Division 2015 webinar series. By listening to our webinar series, you will get the best of the best in the lean industry. Stay tuned to the end of this recording for more details. This month, our speakers are Anna Bailey and Derek Browning from LeanCor. Anna and Derek will introduce themselves and LeanCor, so let's join Anna and Derek as they present Lean Material Flow.
All right, thanks, Paul. Just a quick voice check if everybody hears me. Wanted to just introduce LeanCor, a little bit about us, and then Ann and I will introduce ourselves. So LeanCor is a trusted supply chain partner. We partner with companies looking to advance their supply chain and take it to the next level. We do that through three main avenues. The first is our training and education, where we engage companies in training, webinars like we're having today, and really coach folks about taking their supply chain to that next level. In the event that any of those customers want to engage us with project work, with assessments, and let us send in some qualified leaders to drive supply chain improvements in their organization, we will engage in a consulting activity where we will run projects and do assessments and really drive some efficiencies and effectiveness through their supply chain. So all of the content that we're using in our training and education is actually content that we've vetted and tried and tested and really saw valuable results from inside of our consulting. And then the third channel would be our third-party logistics activity. So we manage the material and information flow for multiple companies through warehousing, dedicated warehouses, dedicated transportation management, dedicated logistics and network engineering. So we've used these three divisions over the last several years to really drive improvements in several of our customers' supply chains, and I learned a lot, and as we learn more and more, we're embedding that into our training and education activities to get the message out through venues like this.
Derek, we actually do have a question right away. Do you participate in certification material content development with ASQ?
I'm not sure about that one. Anna, do you know?
We don't know. So we don't participate in the Lean certification or the black belt or green belt. It would be a great opportunity, but we don't do that today. No. We do, other than ASQ, we do partner with universities such as the Georgia Tech Logistics and Supply Chain Institute, and we do participate in certifications with them, but not currently today with ASQ.
Also, Derek, just quickly, there seems to be some background noise. I'm not sure what it is, just if you have the opportunity to resolve that. Other than that, go ahead. Thanks.
Okay, a little bit of my background. I've been with LeanCor for 10 years. I am a senior instructor, coach, and consultant, actively involved right now in sales and marketing, and so I work with companies that are just beginning their journey, and companies that maybe have been on the lean journey for a while but are now trying to take the next steps inside of their supply chain. And we'll partner with those companies and begin consulting projects and training education within their end-to-end network. We'll partner with suppliers, and customers, and pull all of them together into similar projects so that we can drive improvements and effective results throughout their supply chain.
Okay. Hey everyone, and I'm Anna Bailey, and I'm the director of LeanCor Training and Education. So as Derek introduced earlier, LeanCor has its three divisions: training and education, consulting, and then our third-party logistics, or what we like to call our operations side. I'm the director of training and education, so I'm responsible not only for teaching, which I love to do, and coaching, but also managing our body of knowledge, managing our curricula, managing those partnerships with universities, like I mentioned earlier, like Georgia Tech, the University of Kentucky, St. Louis University, some, everywhere around the world. So definitely really excited to be here today, you guys. Also with ASQ, though, wanted to mention, now that I see it on this slide, I am a certified Six Sigma Black Belt with ASQ, and of course really proud to be part of the Lean Enterprise division. So I can't see who's attending here, but just wanted to call out and say hey to everyone that I know from the time I've been at ASQ. Also just, call out, it's Veterans Day, so all the veterans that are on this call, thank you for your service, and thanks for joining this webinar today on your day, and also if you're a family of one. And thanks, Paul, also to you, a call out to you for organizing this webinar and continuing to do so, to continue to spread some knowledge across our organization. All right, so let's get right to it. I'll kick us off, Derek, with lean material flow. And you all came over here with lean material flow, and I love that question, Paul, that you asked in the beginning. Right, like why? What's the why behind lean material flow? And I wrote as fast as I could. There was a few really great call-outs, and the ones I captured, first one I heard was, of course, about the customer. Right, we want lean material flow, and we always like to say, what's the purpose? It's to deliver the highest possible value to the customer at the lowest possible total cost. So definitely the customer. I heard heartbeat of production, which is really great. Avoid waste. Okay, have efficient processes, create value, and definitely, kept jotting down a lot about waste and value. And if we think of the word just flow, right? So if we think of the word flow, we usually think of, okay, let's think of a stream, or let's think of something that just doesn't stop. It just keeps going, and it has very little variability. It doesn't go up and down. It just goes very straight with very little variability. Sorry, somebody's inviting me to call. So if we think of the word flow and we think of material flow, what we want and what I want you all to imagine is, what if you had your material and information just moving steadily towards the customer and it never stopped? Right? So what if we imagine, your product or your part, and it just moved from supplier to your manufacturing plant, to your distribution centers, all the way to your customer, and it never stopped? How would that affect our customer? How would that affect our costs? How would that reduce the variability and the waste within our systems? So this is how we think every day, when it comes to lean material flow. We're asking that question every day. And I encourage you all to ask the same question. What if this one part that we work with every day moved directly to the customer and never stopped? How can I get it to be there? So really what we want, and if we think of this definition on the slide, we are truly just designing and implementing processes that will deliver what we want when we want it, right? When we need it. So we use the 10 rights at LeanCor. You guys have probably always heard about the 8 rights, but we added another 2, always just trying to be thought leaders, and we realized that we needed these other 2. So the 10 rights, what do we want when it comes to lean material flow? We want the right product to the right customer in the right quantity, in the right quality, at the right time, from the right source, at the right price, the right cost, with the right service, and all within the right complexity. Okay? Now, as all you know, right, that's very difficult. There's many things that go on within our industry, within our company, within our own facility, many different people that we work with, that makes our processes or makes our material unpredictable or uncontrollable. So using the words, of ASQ or of quality, how do we make our material, how do we make our processes more predictable and more controllable so that we create that lean material flow? We continue to add value to the customer. So if we look at this slide right now, understanding the challenges, these are, very, very high level. I know there's a million challenges out there, but the truth is, Derek and I especially have the opportunity to work every week at a different customer. We have that opportunity to see many different industries, many different facilities, visit many different customers, and what we find is all of these can be fixed. We can lower that variation to create lean material flow within every industry. Okay, so some of these, right? We have multiple suppliers, multiple customers, multiple third parties. Yes, we have high variability in the way our material flows. Not every material is the same. Not every part acts the same. We have high variability in lead times, okay, and some of those are because of our suppliers, and some of those are because of demand. We have high variability in supplier performance and capability, which affects our inventory. Data are not always abundant or accurate, and because of that, decisions are made blindly. So all of these, you know, if we really just kind of take a moment, step back and look at this, many times a lot of these, what we find, are self-inflicted. We ourselves in our companies don't have the data we need, or we're making decisions not based on the entire supply chain. We're making decisions that are affecting and that are adding variability within our entire supply chain. So let's take a step back and think, how do we now start to move and start to create a plan for every material, for every part within our industry, so that we start to create pressure around our lean material flow. The first place we usually start, and this is where we're going to spend a lot of time today, is on PFEP, or Plan for Every Part. And, you know, love talking about this. It's a little dry, but still love talking about it because it's absolutely necessary. You know, one of the most important visible tools, one of the most important things that we need within any industry, but also one of the most that aren't very used, okay? Very rarely used. We see, you know, Derek and I, we go to many companies, like I said, and we see, you know, little artifacts or PFEPs that are starting to come together, plans that are starting to come together, but still that lack of a plan exists. So, you know, as you go through this webinar today, to ask yourselves, do we have in our organization, do we have a plan for every part within our company? And do we have a plan on how we use that part? So let's look at this, right? It monitors and controls the movement of parts within the supply chain network until the point of use. So we're looking at demand, we're looking at on-time delivery, we're looking at consumption. We're literally, the definition of this is a plan for every part within our industry. Where is it coming from? How is it being used? How is it being stored? How much does it cost? When do we replenish it? When does our customer need it? How does our customer use it? So it's literally all the information about one part, about one SKU, one product, one part, all information in one place. And from this, from understanding that information, we can now start to develop a plan for how we flow material throughout our supply chain, from the first point of use all the way to our customers. So like I said, you know, every part has its own story. We can't just sit back and say we're going to do lean material flow and this is the one way we're going to do it. This takes time. We need to look at every product or every part that we have within our company, and we need to understand what's the plan. Right? So we talk a lot, especially in Lean Enterprise Division, we talk a lot about PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act, or Plan, Do, Check, Adjust. So we talk a lot about PDCA. So how do we start to use that thinking? How do we start to use that cycle, even in the way that we handle our material? Okay, so what's our plan for every part, and how do we manage it? When we put a plan together, how do we know that the inputs change? Or how do we know that we need to update our plan for every part? How do we get that visibility? These are the questions that we need to be asking ourselves. And you know, for the rest of this webinar, we're really going to get into detail on what are some ways that we can start doing that. And again, a well-designed and maintained PFEP system significantly reduces material shortages, inventory, supply chain complexities, and costs. And this is absolutely true. I was in Central America 2 weeks ago, and the purpose of my visit was literally to sit down for 3 days in front of a PFEP system and go through every single part. 28,000 SKUs, right? What's the plan for this part, and how do we reduce our inventory because of it? You know, just a call out too, right? We don't do a PFEP, just like every other tool that we've learned in Lean and Six Sigma. We don't use tools just because they're there. We use tools because there's a reason why we're using them. Right? So Shingo always tells us you need to know why before you know how. So what's the why of why you all are in this webinar today, or why you feel the need to have a PFEP and to have lean material flow? You know, it depends on every company. Every company is different. Maybe it's maybe you want to reduce working capital, so you really need to tackle the amount of inventory you have. Maybe you want to reduce total cost. Maybe you want to increase velocity in your supply chains. Maybe you want to increase quality. Right? So there's many, many different reasons, but I encourage you really think about that why before you jump straight into the PFEP. So that example I was just talking about, 2 weeks in Central America, the reason was to reduce inventory and to increase velocity. So now as we look at every part, what's the plan that we need to create for every part? Right? Where does it need to come from? How often does it need to come? How do we need to store it? Where do we need to put it? You know, does it need to be closer to dock doors because it's a high moving part? Who is it going to? How is it going to be used? How can we collaborate better with our customers? So what's the plan for that part to really hit that purpose of increasing velocity and reducing working capital? Okay.
Yeah, Anna,
so, yes.
You mentioned there when you talked about the 10 rights, all of the aspects of kind of quality of material flow, and in the chat log there was a question from Martin Hinckley. What is world-class quality control, and how can we achieve it? So as we're moving forward in the presentation and beginning the next slide, I thought we could just kind of address that question. What I think we've seen over the last several years is the world-class organizations have gotten to a point where they assume quality. And so a lot of the quality activities that they're performing are to some extent perfunctory, where it's just regular audits to make sure that quality is maintained, and not really needing to improve anything to drastic measures on form, fit, function of materials. Where we're seeing the biggest gaps from a quality standpoint is the other elements of the rights. Did we have the product in the right place from the right source? Is it coming at the right time? Do we have the right pricing and costing figured out? More often than not, the information flow and the flow of the material is where the quality problems arise, not so much the specific part quality. So when we talk in terms of world-class operations and best-in-class operations, those are the ones that have kind of prioritized those 10 rights, and they're going on after the areas of those rights that they're just not able to connect on.
Great. Thanks, Derek. All right. So who uses PFEP? Okay, so on this slide, we won't go into every single one of these, but who uses PFEP? You see corporate and plant logistics, you see engineers, you see process techs, suppliers, packaging engineers, and this is what we hope for, right? We hope that just about everyone is using the PFEP. But let's just ask a quick poll. So Paul, if you can bring it up, who would benefit most from using a plan for every part at your organization? Who would benefit the most from using a PFEP at your organization?
Okay, everyone's answering the poll right now. While they're doing that, let me ask another question that came in. PFEP, do we do a PFEP for every part? And I think the thought process is there. We have A, B, and C parts. A being the high runners, and C being the low runners. Do you do PFEP for everything?
Paul, I can take that one.
Go ahead, Derek.
Paul, I can take that one. The answer is yes and no. Usually when we approach PFEP, there's a stratification and a prioritization where we want to make sure that the active parts all have a plan. Inactive parts are often, we've got them in our warehouses, we're not really using them, but they're still in the system somewhere. So those parts are not a priority. We mainly want to focus on the parts that are flowing through the system. And then when it comes to a stratification of the active parts, there are those active parts that are the high volume, high velocity, moving through frequently, that are the highest priority. And we want to make sure that we're tackling the highest priority items first with the intent to get to every part, because it's oftentimes those parts that you don't think about that can cause you the most problems, shut plants down, stock out orders, and make customers mad. When we think about how do we then approach a database of 30,000, 40,000 parts, it's often not realistic to do every one of them line by line by line by line. So the way that we approach that is we'll create a matrix of sorts and really look at the DNA of the SKU patterns, what kind of volume, velocity, size, what kind of order patterns, what kind of value or profitability are these materials, and based on the characteristics, we'll do some grouping and really start to kind of chunk out groups at a time. So we may have a chunk of C parts that are small, that have a certain kind of variety of characteristic, and that they flow through a supply chain in a certain way. And we're going to handle those all together in a similar fashion. So we're able to knock out 5,000 SKUs all at once. Another thing that we often see is within that 40,000 SKU limit is you may have families of SKUs that are all very, very similar. And so one family of SKUs, 100 SKUs, all nesting under some variation of one product family. If there's no significant volume or value or velocity difference in that family, no real variation there, then we're able to just kind of knock out all 100 of them with similar application of a plan.
Okay, I have the answers to the poll. Anna, we rearranged the answers just slightly, so I'll read the answer. 60% said corporate plant logistics or repack operations. 85% purchasing, planners, or suppliers. 55% material flow and packaging engineers. 45% of our audience said industrial engineers, and 38% said process techs.
Okay.
Yeah, and that distribution, it seems very similar to what we have seen in other places. It's it's quite frequently that the logistics folks are and the purchasing and planners are the folks that are most benefited by these activities, because the plan for the part is a connection of a supplier's end of line to a customer's beginning of line or distribution point. And so it's making sure that we have a solid plan for the transition and the handoffs and all of the movement. So any time a part is going to move through the supply chain and change hands, it's an opportunity for failure, for waste to be part of the system, and some significant problems to be involved. So it's definitely an opportunity. I as a biased individual would probably challenge the group as to why it's not 100% for every category, but I tend to love my PFEP a little more than most. So if we look about what are the elements of the PFEP, and we see here this kind of picture of the connection of a supplier to an assembly line, as we talked about. The elements of the PFEP is to say, do we have a plan for every step of the supply chain? And so within a PFEP, you may have different segments or sections for what's the plan from supplier to our receiving dock. What is the plan from the receiving dock to a repack location or a supermarket within the facility? What is the plan from that supermarket to then a point of use area? And so we've got plans that are somewhat segmented, and it really directs the movement of the material through the operations to drive the maximum amount of effectiveness and benefits to the supply chain. And this idea for planning every individual part is so that we can control its movement. So every stage in the supply chain is managed with the principles of driving costs down, driving the amount of waste out of the system, and trying to stabilize and create a predictable system through the network. And then it can easily be connected to any kind of reverse logistics, or if you have any third-party manufacturing or some outsourced modification where parts are coming in from suppliers, they're delivering to a third party for some small transformation, and then coming back in-house for an application. But this connection from, say, a supplier to a point of use could also be used on the distribution side as well. We've got target inventory levels in the distribution centers, whether we've got a hub and spoke model, and how we move material through the DC network, when or if we're going to kit product into finished goods kits, when that would happen. So the planning elements may look a little bit different because it's going to be a different plan, but the principles behind it are all going to be very important. If we look on the next slide there, the starting point, because it can be overwhelming. So we're talking to folks that they may have 10,000 parts, and they're saying, well, where do I start? What do I even do? How do I begin this process? Well, first of all, it's not all on one person's shoulders. It's a cross-functional team effort, and the best way to go about it is really trying to drive a part at a time. Go collect a part or a few parts, learn about the process, learn about the collection process to identify the best way possible. You may find out that a lot of the information already exists in areas of your ERP and in different contracts that you've got with suppliers. Many of the suppliers that you work with, they as part of their outbound packaging database and within their ERP systems for shipping efficiencies, will have bits and pieces of this information. So as you go kind of part by part and identify all the areas where you can collect the information, it begins to get easier. And then you can start to group the parts into categories. As you group the parts into categories, you're going to identify there's some parts that are large and require pure one-piece flow just because of the size of equipment necessary to move it. There's going to be other groups and categories that are very small pieces that are relatively cheap. The price for them is pennies, and so the different kind of groupings of these parts can be categorized so that we can treat each of them differently. You'll want to collect any kind of usage details, supplier details, the delivery methods, the frequencies, and a lot of this information you're going to be surprised as you collect it, because the folks that are managing it now have an impression of how it's working, but as you start to dig in and understand part by part how it's actually working, you can uncover all kinds of opportunities. It's common for us when dealing with inventory inaccuracies to just start looking at how suppliers are shipping and what lot size and pack quantities and how customers are ordering, and look at the disconnects in there, the rounding values that have been injected in the system with very little thought, and what and the result is all of the kind of confusion, the overshipments or undershipments that can occur. So we'll start picking up on that and identifying the disconnects that drive to chaos and confusion within the supply chain. But once you've got kind of a pilot grouping together and you've got a good idea of where you're going to collect it, you can roll this out very quickly. And the principle there is many hands make light work. Engaging all of the supply base and asking them to submit their information, connecting ERP systems together or WMS systems with your ERP systems, and knowing where that data resides and how to quickly pull it in different queries. You can start to collect this very quickly over time. We'll look at the next slide here, Anna. this is a case study that we experienced. We had a company we're working with and operating out of 7 storage facilities. And it was a 7 inbound storage facilities that had just kind of grown over time and was the result of many changes and things that has happened. If this was to continue without any kind of plan, you can imagine the 7 facilities would turn into 10, and you would end up with lots of additional headcount and frustration in managing the process. At the same time, they were not managing FIFO, so they had kind of large amounts of obsolete stock. The problems with inventory inaccuracies and location inaccuracies, and the amount of expedites where we've just got to ship parts as we find them were outstanding. So as we started to implement, what is the plan for every part, and let's get some design and discipline around where these parts are going to be stored. We started to gain visibility to all of the material and information flow. Drove an 80% reduction in expedites from the warehouse, 66% reduction in production downtime, which is significant for the operations. So we saw a 4% reduction in warehouse overtime due to all of the ad hoc planning that was occurring. Water spider overtime went down, and the reduction in days on hand. And this was just the beginning stages of a stabilization effort. We had not gotten yet into the analysis of the PFEP to drive future improvements and additional costs down and so on. So just that initial stage of organizing current state can reap a tremendous amount of benefit, but it also puts us on the path to drive continuous improvement day by day by day. So we want to open up the chat log here and give you all an opportunity to give us some feedback. For those of you that are using PFEP to some degree, we're curious what kind of technologies you're using, and whether you're using just some of you with an Excel workbook that maybe you've just began on the path, that you've created some macros, that you're pulling some information out of the system and beginning to analyze it, or if you've got some automated efforts, you're connecting in with your ERP systems and plugging kind of formulas into the background. Just wanted to get a read on what our audience is doing right now. And if you're not doing anything, let us know that too.
Derek, while everybody's doing that, I got a couple of other questions. Also, just wanted to let everyone know difference between there's a question box and a chat box. Derek has actually asked if you would put it in the chat box. That way everyone can see what you're typing. So I noticed some of the things are starting to come through the question box. One was ERP, Excel template from corporate. But the idea is if you put that over in the chat box, everyone will be able to see it. The question is, what's been your success in trying to take the responsibility for PFEP down to the supplier?
Yeah, and there it's a bit of a mixed bag because it depends on how we go about that activity. And so if we think about the approach to engaging suppliers, if we're just pushing work back on the supplier with no clear vision as to why, as to what the value would be, as to the end game, and it almost just kind of appears to be an exercise because somebody sat on a webinar and a guy named Derek said it's a good idea, then you're going to get a low level of engagement and low quality of information. It's common for me on a where I'll see a poorly deployed effort end up with a spreadsheet that comes back and it's 1,000 boxes that's filled out with varies in every box, and you know somebody just did a copy paste exercise and sent it off because they thought the exercise was foolish. But once a supplier kind of starts to see the value of what you're trying to accomplish, that you're wanting to improve the flow of the material and the information through the system, that you're wanting to make sure that if you're measuring them on fill rate efforts and and lead time reduction, that you're being fair to them and how you're measuring, consistent in how you're measuring. And in many ways, it just opens up the communication lines to solve problems collaboratively through the supply chain. And when that kind of relationship is established and they start to see that it's value, then the information that they're going to ingest them, the questions that they're going to ask will be exponentially better.
Okay, and I guess I have another question, but also want to apologize. It looks like the attendees don't have a chat box. So the questions are coming in on the question box. I have ERP/Excel, Excel PFEP template from corporate, SAP, ERP, demand-driven supply chain software, Excel again, Microsoft AX ERP, and mostly Excel, both systems, but mostly Excel.
Yeah, and I wanted to comment on a couple of things. One is when we say that we're using Excel for something. I ran into a business the other day, and they said that they were running their entire business on Excel, and they said it very kind of ashamedly, and I think we often forget the whole purpose of what we're trying to accomplish. If what we're trying to accomplish is building a plan and really analyzing that plan and making sure that plan is the most effective, if we quickly jump to an automated solution where formulas are hidden and operating in the background, and if we're honest, that very few of the folks engaged with it actually understand how it works, then we can often do ourselves more harm, because we don't really understand how we're going to get to where we want to get. Things are just happening behind the scenes, and we're plugging in numbers and trying to figure out the right mix of numbers that we plug in that are going to produce results that we want to see. But if we do it in an Excel-type template where we can see the formulas, where we understand the hows and the kind of process elements of it, then it can help us to drive towards perfection of our process in a more understandable way. Now, that said, that there is a moment when a company has too many parts, too many locations, and the use of just an Excel document isn't going to be as effective, and they have to go into a larger system that will be accessible from multiple points. But what I do want to do is encourage those that are currently in Excel to not feel bad about that and use it to its fullest potential, and really make sure that you vet out your options before automating anything. Because when you get all of the benefits of the automation, it also comes with some unintended consequences and some limitations.
All right, Derek, that's a great call out. So just with that, whether it's Excel or whether it's a more automated system to put your PFEP on, what we need to do also, and what we encourage everyone to do, is have somebody that is responsible for the accuracy of the PFEP and for updating that PFEP. So it needs to be somebody, the way I always like to say, it needs to be somebody that wakes up in the morning and is worried about whether or not any inputs to the PFEP changed. Right? So who's that person that wakes up in the morning and cares about that, is really responsible for it? So, like it says here, make sure that there's somebody appointed to it. Really important. And you see, this very familiar PDCA. This is a plan for every one of our parts, or for groupings of our parts, or for our most important parts. This is a plan for it. So what are we doing? What's the process that we've created to make sure that we are checking and adjusting with that plan every single day? Okay, what are we doing to make sure that any input that changes through our supply chain is being shown in that PFEP? And also even being more proactive as well. So if we go on to the next slide, right, how are we using this PFEP, and how are we creating this process so that we're more proactive? Both Derek and I have mentioned, right, what's your purpose? what's the purpose of you having that PFEP, whether it's velocity, whether it's reducing inventory, increasing value to the customer, or all of the above. Okay, so how can we use this PFEP and how can we perform in our process to make sure that we're being proactive in getting to that purpose instead of reactive? Okay, so plan for every part. What's our plan and how are we doing this process to make sure that we're proactive? We also always say, without a plan, you can't see problems, because a problem is only a gap between plan and actual. So how are we using our PFEP in order to see problems within our supply chain? Or Derek, how you mentioned earlier, how are we using our PFEP to understand when we have fluctuations or changes with our supplier, or fluctuations in demand? How are we using our PFEP for that? So keep all those in mind. So let's see, one more question, really just to get everyone engaged. What analysis do you perform on your PFEP? So what do you do to understand the validity and the accuracy of your PFEP?
And go ahead and answer that in the question box. Derek and Anna have another question, and that is, how do we adapt this to custom high mix, low volume type industry?
So this is customized low, is it high mix, low volume?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a challenge because there's some economies of scale that can happen with any kind of PFEP. And really at the heart of the question is an assumption that a PFEP is a monolithic tool, and really it's a set of principles that we're applying in various forms of a tool to really address problems in the connections of our business. So in a kind of mass manufacturing, low mix, high volume, the tool may look completely different than what it would look like in a low volume, high mix scenario. The low volume, high mix scenario, you're still doing the types of analysis where you're trying to say what is a plan for each of these SKUs, and what are the similarities in these SKUs, and which of these SKUs kind of align in similar families or value streams. But the actual plan itself may be quite different. How you store it, where you store it, what packaging you're going to use for it. And so it's not so much about, do we have this kind of uniform tool, the same tool that the automotive plant down the street would be using, but are we using kind of Deming's PDCA cycle on the material and information flow through our operations? Are we connecting with customers and suppliers to make sure that we've got a good, solid, documented plan that we can then perform check adjust cycles on to drive future improvements?
Okay, Anna, I have some answers to your question. Review quarterly, error of forecast versus actual, compare planned output to actual process yield. We currently have indicators on our dashboard page of our PFEP. We also have checks and balances with external Excel workbooks that tell us whether things are aligned or not. Additionally, we have 5 buyers that are constantly using our PFEPs. And then finally, part movement, part stockouts by part number, current min-max SKU number, lead times to replenish part number, part quantity analysis. We track inventory, level, production, days coverage fluctuations, expediting charges, and shortages.
Wow, so good. So making issues visible is what I heard in a lot of those, and many different processes to analyze the current validity of the PFEP. And really important, in any lean organization, I always say lean people are the most, well, in my view, maybe not everyone agrees with me, but I think lean organizations, lean people, I like to call us, we're very disciplined. We understand that entropy happens, right? We understand that all our processes, no matter whether we have a plan for every part or we have a plan for a process or anything within our organization, we know that it wants to go to the point of disorder. It wants to fall apart. So, you know, all these different answers that I just heard from you is telling me that you understand that. You understand that we don't just create a plan and it goes as we planned. Okay, so keep that in mind, right? And I like to just say it because we can't just assume traditional knowledge. Like, keep that in mind. When you create a PFEP, it takes a lot of work, a lot of resource hours, a lot of time, even some costs, okay, to put that work into it. So really, let's think about how every day, you know, I heard, you know, once a quarter, but what are we doing even within that quarter? What are we doing to make sure that we are checking and adjusting on that plan for every part? What are we doing to understand whether anything in our system has changed? And it sounds like you all have some great visible tools to help you see those. And again, as I mentioned before, who's responsible? Like, who's responsible to take that information and make sure that our PFEP is accurate? And how are we connecting that people to people and that process to people, those connection points, to make sure that we are keeping that PFEP valid every day? I was pointing out earlier, having an inaccurate PFEP can cause a messy supply chain. It can cause a messy flow to your material, right? It takes away from that goal that we have for having that lean material flow. So we really need to take care of our PFEP and make sure that we are being proactive and we are making those issues visible every time we have a gap away from our plan.
So we've got another poll here. Which advantages do you need most, or do you get most out of the PFEP that you're using? And as we're asking the advantage that you need most, we're going to just kind of talk through a few that commonly come. One is that of inventory accuracy. So when we're measuring the outcome of inventory accuracy, more often than not, we're dealing with the results of a broken process. And a process that does not have a solid disciplined plan, it's very difficult to find where it breaks down and how it breaks down. So putting in place that plan will drive the right results of the inventory accuracy, as well as point us back to where the process is breaking down if we do not have the inventory accuracy. People and process optimization. When we manage our people part of the organization separately than the process part of the organization, then we often find ourselves measuring two different silos that are connected in the execution of the supply chain. The PFEP will drive process improvement that we can then connect our people to easily so that they can see how the process is being managed. The ordering system matching consumption. The disconnects that often occur in supply chain, the bullwhip effect that occurs as a result of solid plans not matriculating back through the supply chain, can be calmed down and eased with a good solid plan in place. The idea of material flow optimization, having the plan for what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and executing that plan, and the regular check adjust cycles to that plan really helps drive the efficiencies and the effectiveness of those activities, and anything from ordering system to last mile logistics. Having that plan in place that we can then execute to minimize the expedites, to minimize the chaos, but then to check adjust against to drive future improvement will be solidly beneficial to our organization.
Okay, Derek, I actually have the answer to the poll questions. 17% inventory accuracy, 23% people and process optimization, 26% ordering system matching consumption, 34% internal material flow optimization, and 0% on the last mile logistics.
Okay, so it sounds like in there is some elements of advantages occurring but maybe some opportunities for additional advantages as well. So I'd be encouraged to see, as a result of this webinar, some critical thinking around how we're using PFEP to drive end-to-end benefits, to improve some of the last mile logistics, or improve the inventory accuracy of our organization. So as we wrap up, I want to open it up, any kind of questions we've got, so that we can take those questions and offer feedback. But as a thank you for your time today, LeanCor wanted to offer you a discount on some online training that we've got available on our website. You can go to leancor.com/online-lean-training, and using the discount code LEANLEADER, you can get a 20% discount on Lean Leadership curriculum based off of our Shingo Prize-winning, award-winning book, People, which is a leader's guide to how to engage people in the organization to drive improvement. Wanted to offer that up, and then see if we've got any additional questions.
We do still have some questions, and if anybody else has any other questions, please feel free to stick them in the question box. You mentioned the word water spider. What is that?
Yeah, so a water spider, or a water spider route, if you've ever been down to the local creek and you've watched these bugs, and I think oftentimes they're called water striders, how they kind of float across and skip across the top. That's where that term kind of came from, and the picture of it is inside of a manufacturing facility or a production facility. You've got these folks with a well-defined discipline plan for how they should skip around through the process to distribute inventory on a regularly scheduled cadence. So the idea would be we could have a water spider route that runs every 2 hours, and that 2 hours is going to run replenishment to different areas of our manufacturing line or assembly line. And if you peeled the roof off and you kind of watched this activity in action, it would, while very disciplined and tracking to a cadence, it would look very similar to these a group of water spiders just kind of crawling around on the top of the water.
Why does PFEP fail?
Yeah, I would say PFEP, along with any kind of lean acronym, 5S, PDCA, you name it, it fails because we quit. It fails because we give up, and we're not really pushing against the entropy in the system. So a lot of these initiatives, they start off with well-intending individuals that are looking to get some results, and as they start to execute it, they run into some barriers, some problems. They don't get the results they expected right away, and other priorities come in front of the one that they started on. And so with any kind of initiative like this, we've got to continue the efforts to follow up and practice the discipline to drive the process forward.
Okay, Anna, while we're continuing to talk, can you go back to the 10 rights slide? Another question here is, does the PFEP take place of a physical inventory, either an annual inventory or cycle counting?
The question was, does it take the place of inventory counting?
Yes. Does it take the place of a physical inventory, either an annual or cycle counting?
No. So when it's two different things. So of course, if we have a very disciplined PFEP and we trust the information that's in there, then we can probably argue that we don't have to put in the time to do that annual physical inventory count. But the annual physical inventory count, and the way that we use it even at LeanCor, we even do one at our fulfillment center. We do it to make sure that our inventory accuracy is where we believe that it's at. And it's also another way to understand whether or not the accuracy with our PFEP is right, whether or not we're to plan. So I think that's a really, great discussion to have with your team, but definitely a big input into that decision would be whether or not the accuracy is good with our PFEP.
Okay, we have 2 questions left, so if anybody has any other questions, please submit them. What are the first steps in implementing PFEP?
Yeah, I would say to be somewhat redundant, the first step is the plan, and try to come up with a purposeful plan. So what do we want to accomplish with the PFEP? And based on what we want to accomplish is then what the PFEP is going to design to do. So if our desire is to improve the inventory accuracy, then our PFEP is going to look a little bit different than if the desire is to improve and facilitate flow. If our desire is to reduce the cost of goods or the bill of material cost on some of our finished goods units, then the PFEP is going to be designed to do something a little bit differently. So first start off with that purpose and then create the plan for how you're going to start. And then I would recommend that pilot. So the group of SKUs, maybe an area or section of the production line that would be a bottleneck area, and start there, execute it, learn the process, understand what you did wrong and what you collected wrong, and then after some reflection, grow it. Take it to the next area of the line, take it to the rest of the plant, take it outbound to your customers, and on down the line. Now, all that said, as the VP of Sales, I still have to plug in that a good first step could be to give LeanCor a call.
Yep, good one. There was a lot of discussion about the PFEP systems that customers are using, or I shouldn't say customers, that our attendees are using. We had a question: could you recommend 1 or 2 systems that you feel like are the best?
Yeah, we've got a few that we're using with different customers, and have actually seen instances where a customer would use a system and then in another area of the plant use another system and end up with different groups liking different elements of each of the systems. So I'm hesitant to identify one system that would be a kind of LeanCor recommended. In general, we would say let's start off with an Excel deck and just start with some kind of manual understanding of what we want to accomplish, and then we can vet out a few different systems as part of the expansion plan based on how you're going to be using it.
Okay. Paul, were there any more questions?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hit I meant to hit the button. Sorry. I'm out here talking to myself. Is the goal to be able to feed the MRP with PFEP data on a regular basis, and vice versa?
Some folks may have that goal. But I would say that PFEP could even transcend MRP. It could give us direction as to when and how we're going to use MRP. So in situations where the MRP is a traditional MRP that takes forecast and balances it up against inventory on hand and inventory in transit to come up with requisition orders, then we may only use that form of MRP for a certain grouping of our SKUs because of the characteristics of those SKUs. Whereas other areas of the PFEP may suggest that we're running 2-bin systems or Kanban systems or min-max systems that could be defined as different forms of MRP. But I would say the two could be somewhat disconnected. There would, however, be data that's very critical and important as an input to MRP, that having an active PFEP would make sure that we had the best and highest quality information.
Okay, that was actually the last question. I just first want to thank Derek and Anna. Thank you very much, and thank you, LeanCor, for providing you to us. And all of you attendees, I really appreciate you taking your valuable time to do this. Anna and Derek, is there any last words you would like to say?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks, Paul, for your time today, and to the group in the audience. Thanks for hanging with us this full time. If you've got any questions, I mentioned earlier that I love PFEP, so if you want to reach out to me offline and connect and we can chat, I'd be glad to talk.
That's right, and I agree. Everyone, thank you so much for joining this webinar today. Paul, you as well for organizing, and Derek, great job. So everyone, enjoy your day.
I am Paul Harbath, the 2015 Chair of the American Society of Quality Lean Enterprise Division webinar series. I want to thank Anna and Derek for their presentation, and thank you for listening to Lean Material Flow. If you have any questions about the content of this webinar, feel free to contact Anna or Derek directly. Next month, our presenter will be Gwendolyn Galsworth. Gwen is a visual workplace expert and president and founder of Visual Thinking Incorporated and the Visual Lean Institute. Since the early 80s, Gwendolyn has worked to codify the various elements of workplace visuality into a single coherent framework of learning and application, leading visual conversions in manufacturing, hospitals, food processing, MROs, and low-volume, high-mix factories. To date, 2 of her 8 books have won the coveted Shingo Prize. The American Society of Quality Lean Enterprise Division webinar series is the place for you to hear the best of the best in the lean industry and learn more about how to apply lean in your application. The American Society of Quality Lean Enterprise Division is a global network of professionals helping individuals and organizations apply proven and leading-edge lean principles and practices to achieve dramatic results for your personal and organizational success. Come lean with us.